So in this video you will see I've made two large pots, and throughout the video you'll see both of them. Here I am getting a large amount of clay centered. I would guess this is probably around 10, maybe 8 to 10 pounds of clay. And it takes a bit of mustering, and I would recommend having softer clay to throw anything and center anything of this size. So getting centered, of course, you can't move on until you get your nice lump of clay perfectly centered. So I've made these big pots in two sections. So the first piece that I'm centering here is the bottom. And I've chosen to make the bottom section with more clay. So after you're centered, you're going to make your opening. I've got both my hands that are just kind of, really compressing down in. I use my full hand around that edge then to open up, pull back and open up. My hands are continuing to try to keep that donut shape centered as well. And now I'm recentering that donut, actually making a small pull at the same time by compressing and pulling up. So I've actually made my first little pull, opening up a tiny bit more. I'm going to make a nice wide base, kind of recentering before I go up again. And you can get quite a bit of height with just your hands pulling up. So here you'll see me take my wooden tool and my wooden rib, and I'll compress along the bottom, to get some of that slurry. You'll see me wiping off the slurry from the bottom of the rib, kind of neatening up that bottom, opening up a little bit wider to the side so that I can then continue to raise my walls, pulling them up, getting some height. And always kind of take the sponge and get your top rim set and nice and not wobbly. So I like to make a couple of pulls at least with my wooden rib. Here's my last pull with my hand, my fingers. Kind of have my sponge in my hand. I'm not really using the sponge. At this point, I'm really not wanting to add any moisture, maybe to the top edge only. But the wooden rib is a very nice way to get a lot of that moisture wicked off the outer edge. It really kind of compresses the clay. It's going to give you a nice, stiff, stable base, which you're going to count on for a big pot. I have these big ribs that I enjoy using for the big pots. It just gives you more surface area to be able to cover when you're compressing, pulling, smoothing. And again, the compression and stability of this bottom piece to take the weight of an upper section is a good reason to use these ribs. They smooth, but they compress. I don't know if I show here. Okay, I'm trimming the bottom, but if I don't show here, I do have a heat gun that I will stiffen this bottom section a little bit with before I add the top. But I'm preparing it for it to be done once I get that top piece applied. So trimming up the bottom, and for all purposes it'll be done. I don't trim off. I don't use my wire tool and cut it from the I want it to be exactly where it is, and you could use your wire tool moving it, so you leave it without cutting it from the bat. Just getting it nice and cleaned up and smooth as though it's done. other than wire tooling it off. The last step is to give yourself a nice, smooth edge in which you're going to be placing your collar and measuring it with some calipers. I'm measuring across the width so that the next piece that I make, get that piece set, will match that. So here I'm going fast. We're doing the whole thing all over again. I've got a smaller amount of clay. This might be 5 pounds. And centering again, opening again. And ultimately getting a section that will get attached to the bottom of that pot. This is going to be the top of the pot. You can do it one of two ways. You can go all the way down to the bat, or you can leave some clay. I've left a little bit of clay, which I'll end up cutting out later, but I have found that that little bit of clay with a big wide collar, it keeps my pot stable and don't risk it kind of sliding around on your bat. Kind of keeps it securely nice and round. So in this case, I have left a little bit of clay at the bottom. But I'm doing the same thing. I've got to get to that width. I'm not quite there. I've got a little bit of extra clay, not only to add a little bit more height to the pot, but I've got to get that width. You can see I'm starting to open it up a little bit more. About there. I'm going to go ahead and give myself a nice smooth edge to attach them. And let them set up a little bit. I use my heat gun. And this is an awkward moment. I was opening up this bottom, taking this clay off, and I there's much better ways to do it. I was not thinking before I started attacking this. I used my needle tool, then I got in there with my little trimming tool, terrible angle. This is probably a good reminder of where you could have just gone to the bottom of the bat and left yourself a nice reveal on the edges, because it was awkward getting this clay out. But there, we got it out. And here's where we're going to attach the collar. And this is where I have to explain I ended up cutting out completely that section. So I had to revert to an insert of another smaller pot that I did today. And I was not filming during this time. I thought I was. So here's what you would have done with that big pot. You would have put your first piece, the bottom piece, back on the wheel and prepared both that edge and the other section that you made, those two flat surfaces with scoring and a little bit of slip. And yeah, I omitted filming this. I thought I was filming and I must have stopped it. So here I've got a second pot demoing how I attach these two. Neither of them have been cut from the wheel, from their bat, and it's very easy then to just put it on top and match it up. Using your calipers to get your right size, and then moving your wheel around in order to see if you've got everything aligned. You can shift it back and forth. You haven't really smoothed anything yet, so there's still some room for juggling. Once you've got it where you think it's good, you can kind of begin to smooth that joint so that it won't move anymore, because now what you're going to do is you're going to take your wire tool and you're going to cut this away from the bat. And you cut straight back. I did not. I got excited and I cut straight back and then down, and I kind of gouged a little bit out that back side. So I lost a little bit of the height on this. I ended up spending a little bit of extra time as well trying to clean it up. And, that's just a reminder when you're coming with that wire tool, just come straight across the bottom of that back. Getting on the inside with your fingers right at that seam, right at that joint, and smoothing up and down over and over again with your fingers, and then the rib. The rib is a great tool to compress, and this is a joint that you really need to compress and make sure that you get it nice and here I'm cleaning up that mess. And getting my top rim even and smooth. And we're really close to being done. I do spend quite a bit of time smoothing this joint, working it over and over with the rib. My hands on the inside and running it up along the edge of that rib, so that you can not only make sure you've got a nice strong joint, but you're also smoothing the outside so that you don't see that. You don't have any reference at all that this was two pieces. And then finishing it up at the top, getting yourself a nice rim. Told you I smooth a lot. I probably saw some hairline of a reference to the seam, and I wanted it to disappear. So we do spend a bit of time smoothing. And now for the rim, the final kind of added finishing touch. I think I jump over next and I show you how I smooth a little bit on the big pot, because it took a lot more smoothing. If you thought this took smoothing, the big pot took even more. Yeah, back to the first pot. I had to smooth on the inside. This was not a great meetup. I think my top was a little bit bigger than what it should have been, so I had to do a little bit of hand smoothing before I got in with my rib, and spent a good amount of time smoothing. And you can see that a big rib like that will also help you to eventually work out some of that wonkiness. There's a lot of wonky wobbly going on because you've got these two pieces that were independently centered, and now you're trying to make them work together. So going up with this big rib and covering a lot of surface area, your hand on the inside, working with it, I eventually work out a lot of that wobbliness. And also, I'm trying to get a good shape. I'm wanting a good, smooth, pretty shape. The last thing I did to this pot, you can see I got a shape that I wanted, is I attached a coil, a little additional height. I felt like it was a little short. So not only some height, but also an added element of interest. I took a big fat coil and did a little scoring and slipping and laid it down. Did an angle to my joint there where I combined the two. I overlap them, cutting down at an angle so that you can put those two together, kind of like a little mitered edge that you would like in building wood, smoothing it out. You don't ever, almost that seam almost disappears. Now I'm going to adhere it from the inside. I want that little rim on the outside to continue to show, but on the inside I want it to be solid, and that's where I will join that coil to the pot. So I'm taking my thumb and just sort of smoothing that clay down into the body of the throne pot. Takes a little bit of time to go all around, and then you'll end up being able to use your wheel to smooth it once it's kind of smooth all the way around. You can take a sponge, and there's that seam. I'm continuing to work that, get it smooth. Smoothing a little bit more on the inside. Now I'm pinching it. I'm going to give it a little bit of not only a decorative element, but again, trying to add a little bit of height. And once I've done that, all the way around, I did one final little element of interest, which was kind of using the wheel as a tool to give it one final little kind of center line. I probably had too much clay there. You can see how it's kind of hanging over the edges in some points, and it took me a while to work it all in a fashion that it was smooth. So I spent more time doing that almost than I did throwing the things. These are the kind of finishing touches, though. They're kind of fun. Okay, here's where I now take my finger. I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm still smoothing this thing. Actually, I think I've decided I can get more height out of it too. There, this was fun. Taking my finger and just kind of giving it a little line down the middle of those lines that were my finger marks going up. Thanks for watching, and if you want to receive notifications as to when I post my videos, don't forget to subscribe.